So, if you imagine right now, current day, the technology available, the technology of video games, augmented and virtual reality, brain implants, brain computer interface, or direct input to the brain via light code or electrical current applied to the brain or magnetic field. And don't forget drugs. We can create emotional and all kinds of other perceptual inputs to the brain via chemicals. So, you may not believe that the current level of technology in combination can produce an entirely convincing, indistinguishable simulation, virtual environment. But I think you would admit, based on the evidence of your own personal experience, that although it may not be entirely convincing, it is possible to create a pretty immersive simulation, a video game. And it could be pretty convincing even with just current consumer grade technology. Okay. So if you're still with me, if you admit that this is possible to create a simulation that is at least convincing enough to override your organic environment, you would admit probably that this is possible, to create a video game, a simulation that's at least convincing enough to override your organic environment, to fully distract you, absorb your attention, just based on your own experience of what you know of consumer technology. So then, if this is possible, then it could have happened. And the way reality works, from my observation, is that if we are thinking about this, if we are talking about this hypothetical scenario, if we are even aware of the possibility, then it already exists. It already happened. Because there's nothing new under the sun. We don't invent anything. We only discover it, then forget, then rediscover it. So, if it is an event, a potentiality that we are aware of, that we can understand, that means it already exists. If we're aware of it, if we can understand it, it already exists, because we don't invent anything. There's nothing new under the sun. So what this would mean to the people that have entered into this game, this simulation, this lower dimensional virtual environment, what it would mean to them is that there are now human beings, men, there are now men existing in a higher dimension than them. And since simulating is simplification, loss of energy, information, down, and looking down dimensionally can be known completely, and looking up dimensionally can only be known through analogy, you now have people that know and control your reality completely. men, regular men that know and control your reality completely if you enter into this game, this simulation. And you have no direct knowledge of them whatsoever. So they have complete knowledge of you, and you have no direct knowledge of them whatsoever. Because now that you have entered into the simulation and descended a level, you are now completely unaware of the original higher dimension you came from. And going down dimensionally, being more and more limited, less information, doesn't necessarily apply to what you can do. It applies to the meaning you can derive from the experience. Okay, so going down dimensionally, being more and more limited, less and less information, doesn't necessarily apply to what you can do. It applies to the meaning you can derive from the experience. And I refer to this value, the meaning you can derive from the experience, I refer to this value as resolution. Resolution. The resolution, the meaning you can derive from an experience. So, you can think of it like a mod in a video game. Like a mod someone just made of Halo or of Counter-Strike. If you've seen them, like people will make mods where it's like knife mod, like the only way everyone has a knife, or where everyone looks like a turtle or something. People make these mods of games. So you can think of it like a mod in a video game, like a mod someone made of Halo or Counter-Strike, where now everyone can fly. Everyone can fly in this mod in the video game. So this is the temptation. This is how you can be persuaded convinced to go down dimensionally, to enter into a confining simulation. That's the temptation, is that ye shall be as gods. You'll be able to fly in this mod, in this new world. More actions will be available to you, and it's tempting. But accepting this going down or entering into the game necessitates a memory wipe. So in order to enter into the mod where you can fly into the game, you lose your awareness of the original organic environment you were in before you went into the game. Because the new environment, the virtual environment is an overlay. It's an overlay. The simulation is an overlay. It's a layer, like a layer in Photoshop that completely occludes the layer beneath it. Okay, you agree to that because it's the only way it can work. It's the only way to make it quote-unquote real. Because if you have any awareness at all of the higher dimensions or the layer beneath the overlay, the layer beneath the flying mod, the illusion will fail. The sim won't work that way. If the layer below isn't completely hidden from your awareness, then you can never really exist in the sim. It's not immersive. You won't believe it. But the overlay isn't just visual, the way we are using the video game mod or Photoshop layer, a layer in Photoshop as our analogy, is only visual. But this isn't just visual. So the Photoshop layer is only an analogy. In reality, the dimensional overlay, the virtual environment, the simulation or game, is an overlay of not just your visual mode of perception, but an overlay of every mode of perception, every mode of experience. Okay, like we can understand an overlay of visual because they showed us that, they taught us that, they showed us Photoshop and video games, they gave us that, they explained a visual overlay to us. But it's easy for us to think of that because we're used to thinking like that. It's not easy for us to think about overlays of the other senses: sound, smell, tactile, touch. But those are all layers. If you're considering electrical impulses and direct inputs into the brain, if we're talking about a game, an immersive simulation, then it's not just visual, it's anything you perceive, any mode of perception or experience is a layer. So, like, we understand Photoshop, like rearranging the visual layer, but imagine rearranging only the tactile sense layer. So you look around the room, it looks the same, but you get up to walk and you bump into a table. But there's no table there. You can't see the table because only the tactile layer has been altered. So you reach down, you can feel this invisible table, everything, little dents in it, the nooks and the grooves, but you look over and you see it's in the corner of the room 10 feet away, but you're bumped into it here. You go to feel your face, you reach right through, you go to pick up a spoon and you're touching the couch. You don't feel what you're seeing. Or if just the sound layer, auditory experience, that mode of experience, that veil were altered, like you see a motorcycle out the window going by, but you hear the roar coming right up out of the middle of your book. Or someone's talking to you right in front of you, you see their mouth moving, but you don't hear anything, but you hear their voice coming out of the fireplace. Or the smell layer, the olfactory sense mode of perception layer. Like this fireplace smells like dog shit, and a pile of dog shit smells like a birthday cake. Something like that. So the virtual environment, the simulation, is an overlay of every mode of perception, every mode of experience, which I consider to be 9, although that isn't like rock solid or universally applicable. But I usually consider there to be 9 veils or 9 modes of experience that we are wrapped in, quote unquote. The 9 being the five primary senses that are generally acknowledged, as well as 4 other modes of experience that are not as widely acknowledged as modes of perception as the 5 senses are. The other 4 being motion, instinct, emotion, and thought. These are the 4 senses or modes of perception that we experience apart from the primary 5 senses. We have a sense, so it's motion, instinct, emotion, and thought. We have a sense of motion and equilibrium, up and down. Even if our eyes are closed, even if we hear nothing, sitting in a car or an airplane, we experience the sensation of motion and change in orientation. Okay? Motion. Instinct. We have a sense of instinct apart from our 5 senses and apart from thought or emotion. The reflexive raising of an arm to the face to protect, which although we don't cognize it, we still perceive it, we still experience it. Feeling of hunger, the automatic processes of our body, breathing, heartbeat, aversion to predators. These are all sexual feelings. These are all modes of experience, actions of our body that do not fit into the traditional five senses, but we still have a perception of them, an experience of them as a mode of experience. And lastly, so it's instinct, motion, and lastly, we have thought and emotion, which, while not being encapsulated by the five primary senses, are still very real, quote unquote. Definitely exist as a mode of perception or experience. So if we were to enter into an immersive game or virtual environment, each time we tunnel down, go down a layer, we have a new overlay, a new set of 9 veils, or a new set of veils at least, which we are wrapped in, quote unquote. And I've wondered if this relates to the 9 lunar cycles we pass through in the womb, in the matrix. If the moon represents the illusion down, the bottom of the well, the image, then the 9 lunar cycles of gestation, pregnancy, may be the analog of the 9 veils. And if we start as a seed, just a spirit, non-physical, real, and we are wrapped in these successive layers where each one is a veil, a mode of perception. Like passing through a spider web over and over. And once we have passed through and been wrapped in our 9 layers or 9 veils, that is the analog of the formation of the body in the womb. And once this process is complete, that seed, that soul, can then manifest on earth in this level of reality, once it is wrapped in its physicality. Or, that was a long tangent, but I think it was necessary to the premise. But back to the original line of thought. Say you want to enter into the flying mod, the flying game, this new simulation, virtual environment we invented, created, where everyone can fly. So, in doing this, entering in the sim physically, you must be wrapped, quote unquote, in the new overlay, the new set of veils, modes of perception, okay? And this results in the higher dimension where you came from being completely blocked, completely occluded from your perception. Okay? So in accepting this, in agreeing to this experience of the simulation where you can fly, you are doing two things. You are agreeing to two things. The first is a loss of awareness. One, you're agreeing to a loss of awareness, the memory wipe. You are agreeing to that because it is a necessary prerequisite to the sim being immersive, seeming real. Okay? So you're agreeing to loss of awareness memory wipe in order to make it real. The illusion will fail if you have any awareness of the organic environment, the layer you came from. So in order for it to be real, you're agreeing to this memory wipe. And the second thing you are agreeing to is the authority of men. You agree to relinquish your sovereignty, because not everyone is going into the simulation. The purpose of the simulation is to better understand the original environment. To learn why, to bring these experiences from the sim, these perceptions, back out of the sim. So like an extremely intense psychedelic experience or something, you would need to have watchers, babysitters who do not partake in the simulation, who stand watch outside and observe. But this means that to you who did enter into the sim, the game, the flying mod, to you, those people outside are now little g gods to you. They're gods from your perspective. You have put them up above you dimensionally. And now your entire reality, your totality of experience, is known completely by them and controlled. And you are completely unaware of it. So you have relinquished your sovereignty, your free will, at least temporarily. You've set up idols, false gods, with strange powers and dark principalities, because you should have a perfect God direct above you, rather than imperfect men inserted in virtual layers of knowledge and control in between, blocking your view of the truth. Okay, so you want to enter into a reality, quote unquote, where you can really, quote unquote, fly. You want to enter into a reality where you can really fly, quote unquote. So the transaction is this: what you're accepting in order to make that a reality, to make it believable, to make it immersive. What you are agreeing to is A, loss of awareness of the previous reality, memory wipe, and B, 2, raising up human beings as little g gods over you, relinquishing sovereignty. Okay, so now let's say you did it. You agreed to that, and you're in. You're in it. Now you can fly. But even though you're in, even though it seems like more is possible by going down into a virtual environment, for instance, into a simulation where you can fly, in actuality, there is less possibility every time you go down. There's less possibility. It's an illusion. Every time you go down a layer, every time you create a virtual environment, It is a simplification, a model. A model. That is what a simulation is. Less possibility, less loss of energy, less information. It's always a lower resolution. And resolution represents meaning to your organic consciousness. So even though you can fly now in this reality, it's not as meaningful. Like, you can literally derive more meaning just sitting there doing nothing, just sitting still watching a leaf float down the creek on the higher level than you can from flying 1,000 miles per hour like Superman on the lower level in the simulation. Like literally just sitting doing nothing, you can derive more meaning from that on the higher level. Like it's a higher resolution. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You could be picking up dog shit. It'll be more meaningful to you. Anything in the higher level is going to be more meaningful than like flying through a hurricane, battling dragons in the lower level. Whatever stupid shit you can think up for your video game. Like it's always going to be lower resolution than your organic experience, your original experience environment. But what really chaps the little god's ass outside controlling the reality, what really grinds these guys' gears, is that even though they're supposed to have complete knowledge and control over the lower realm, in practical terms, they actually don't. They don't have complete knowledge or control. God, big G God, is actually still there in the lower realm because he is the source of the whole thing, the y-axis. He's the root, the progenitor. So no matter what, if you create a place, any simulation, any level, if you create anything, he's there. Or it couldn't exist. Any place, any dimension, any simulation, any whatever you want to call it, God is always there, or it couldn't exist. So the little g gods have complete knowledge and control of the lower dimension on paper, but they actually can't exercise it. They can't exercise that power, or God would intervene, become apparent. God would become obvious if they were to cross whatever line, whatever uncrossable law of the universe, whatever that may be. It's unable to be known to us as humans on Earth, but whatever that law is of the universe or God, if they can't actually exercise control, because if they crossed it, God would intervene and they would be exposed as fraudulent, impotent, false gods. They would be exposed as an illusion, which they don't want, well, just like a stage magician. So they must rely on fear and implication in order to exercise control. They rely on illusion, manipulation. But ultimately, it's an illusion. And their false authority over you is dependent on your agreement. Their authority over you is dependent on your agreement to setting them up idols over you between you and God, and your agreement to unawareness. And this analogy of this whole thing, the whole going into the simulation where you can fly, the game, the immersive video game, the immersive simulation where you can fly, the temptation to go into there. This analogy can be applied not just to a Matrix video game simulation, but also to the virtual environment of your mental construct in which you exist. Which is a subjective product of imperfect senses. We all exist in our own mental construct. That's what the brain is. We all have to admit that. It can also be applied to the cultural customs and mores of your nation or club or church or workplace or political party or whatever environment that is a virtual environment. You can't act outside of certain formulas, scripts. It's a limited potentiality. It's a virtual environment. It can also be applied to the virtual environment of your phone screen or your TV screen or your computer monitor when you give it 100% of your attention and are completely immersed in it. That if you're giving it 100% of your attention and you're completely immersed when you're watching something or working on the computer, you are entering into a virtual environment. That your mental construct becomes the screen if you're giving it 100% of your attention. And you know this is true. You know, if someone gets so sucked into the computer that the house could be burning down or a gorilla could walk by their bay window and they wouldn't notice because they are completely immersed in that virtual environment.